The blizzard tearing through the Bitterroot Range didn't just bring a bone-chilling cold. It carried the scent of iron and death. Up here in the Montana high country, during the season where nature decides to cull the weak, the wind doesn't just blow, it howls like a pack of hungry wolves trapped in an iron cage. The snow fell in a whiteout so thick the oil lamp inside the Vance cabin was nothing more than a flickering, feeble yellow dot in the pitch-black wilderness. Cassidy Vance stood by the heavy pine windowsill, her rough fingers slowly tracing the receiver of her Winchester 1894. Her hot breath created a thin mist on the frozen glass, obscuring the view of the snow-buried yard. Cass didn't need her eyes. She listened with the instinct of someone raised between the howling of wolves and the eerie silence of the pines. Out here, silence was usually a deadly lie. The snap of a branch breaking under the weight of snow was a dry crack, but the thud of leather boots hitting thin ice behind the stables had a completely different depth and rhythm. "Cass, what are you doing standing there?" A raspy, broken voice drifted from the fireplace, where pine logs were crackling, sending bright red sparks into the air. Jedediah sat in an old oak rocking chair, his eyes clouded and lifeless from years of cataracts. However, his ears were scary sharp. He could tell the difference between the wind whistling through a door crack and the footsteps of a stray fawn half a mile from the house. A heavy bearskin blanket was wrapped around his thin shoulders, hiding protruding ribs and old scars that Cass always believed were marks from a quarry accident in his youth. "We've got company, Pa," Cass answered shortly, her voice as sharp and cold as a blade fresh off a whetstone. She didn't turn around, her eyes still locked on the white void outside. "And the wagon were a long while, and the web recepin'. They're earlier than I reckoned," Jedediah sighed, a breath heavy with the scent of strong tobacco and the weariness of a man who'd carried a heavy secret for a quarter century. "Vance Sterling never was one for waiting, especially when he smells pay dirt." Sterling. That name was like a stain of tar on the history of the Bitterroot region. The mining tycoon owned half the town at the base of the mountain, a man whose hands were always wrapped in clean silk gloves, but whose soul was stained black by blood and bottomless greed. Cass never understood why Sterling was so obsessed with their dirt-poor ranch, but she knew that when a man like him showed up, peace was over. A heavy pounding shook the solid oak door that Cass had reinforced herself with heavy iron bars. That wasn't the knock of a lost traveler needing help. That was the sound of a rifle butt slamming against wood. Cass signaled Jedediah to be quiet and crept like a bobcat toward the door, her Winchester leveled at eye height, index finger resting light on the trigger guard. "Open up. I know you're in there. Open the door if you don't want to end up dead." A young, trembling voice tore through the howling wind outside. Cass narrowed her eyes. She recognized that voice. It was Reese, Sterling's poor errand boy. She cautiously pulled the bolt, cracking the door just enough for the black barrel of her rifle to poke through. A blast of freezing wind and sharp snowflakes surged in, bringing Reese with them, who looked like a ghost at that moment. His face was pale, his lips blue from the cold, and his clothes were as ragged as if he'd just run through a cactus patch. "Talk fast before I put a hole in your head," Cass growled. "Sterling, he's at the bottom of the hill," Reese gasped, collapsing onto the hardwood floor, his whole body shaking violently. "He's got 10 gunmen with him, all border country outlaws. He says Old Man Vance is holding some kind of precious key. He swore he'd level this mountain and burn the ranch to the ground if you two don't hand over the wooden box before moonset." Jedediah suddenly bolted upright with unexpected strength for his age. The rocking chair slammed against the floor. "He's gone mad. That thing doesn't belong to him. It belongs to this land, to the people who've passed." "Pa, what is that thing, exactly?" Cass turned to look at her foster father, suspicion starting to kindle in her heart like a spark on dry straw. For 18 years, her father had never mentioned any box or key. They were just hunters, simple cattle folk living in seclusion. But before Jedediah could answer, a thunderous crack shattered the room's silence. A long-range sniper round smashed through the window glass, shattered the oil lamp on the wooden table, and thudded into the wall, less than 2 inches from Cass's temple. The acrid smell of gunpowder and the pungent scent of oil smoke immediately filled the air. Get down, Cass screamed, grabbing Reese by the collar and dragging him toward the kitchen corner behind thick grain sacks, then diving behind the heavy oak table her father had built 10 years ago. The house plunged into thick darkness. Only the red glow from the fireplace cast aggressive dancing shadows on the walls, looking like demons waiting to swallow those inside. From down the hill, a voice echoed through a megaphone deep, gravelly, and commanding, drowning out the screaming blizzard. Jedediah Vance, you've been running long enough. 25 years for a lie is too long. Give me the girl, give me the box, and I'll let you die with some dignity under that old pine tree. Otherwise, this fire will be the only thing keeping you warm tonight. Cass looked at Jedediah through the flickering firelight. The blind man no longer looked frail. He crawled skillfully toward the corner of the bed, pulling an old tattered leather-wrapped scimitar and a small cedar box carved with strange patterns Cass had never seen in any book from under the frame. Cass, Jedediah whispered, his voice cracking as gunfire began to pepper the walls like rain. Tonight you aren't fighting for this old blind man. You're fighting for a promise I've tried to protect with my life. Don't let him touch this box, no matter the cost. Cass felt a surge of heat run down her spine, a strange sensation she couldn't explain. She looked down at her hands in the firelight skin, slightly tanned, high and sharp cheekbones, completely different from Jedediah's looks, or anyone else's in the town of Bitterroot. Vague memory fragments of a dark-eyed woman singing a song in a language that sounded like flowing water flashed through her mind. They want a war? I'll show them what hell breaking loose in a blizzard looks like. Cass gritted her teeth, her fingers expertly chambering a fresh round into the Winchester. She crawled toward the back door, which led to a low-roofed porch. Cass knew every inch of this ranch better than anyone. She knew where the snow drifted deep and which boulders could shield her from stray bullets. Her movement was so light that the crunch of snow under her boots seemed to melt into the sound of the storm. Flashlights from the bottom of the hill swept across the yard, revealing the silhouettes of 3 gunmen crouching toward the stable. They moved in a triangle formation, deadly professional and cautious. Cass held her breath, tucking the rifle butt firmly into her shoulder, feeling her heart beat steady in sync with the breath of the wilderness. Crack. Cass' first shot tore through the night, slamming straight into the fuel tank of a snowmobile Sterling's crew used to haul explosives down the hill. A massive fireball erupted, staining the white snow red and throwing 2 nearby soldiers back. Screams of agony echoed through the air. On the right, she's on the porch. Kill her, a soldier shrieked. Cass immediately rolled into the deep snow just as a volley of lead shredded the floorboards where she'd just stood. She didn't rush to return fire. She circled behind the woodshed, using the darkness of the dying fire to reposition. The enemy outnumbered her 10-1, but she had the advantage of a wolf in its own territory. At the foot of the hills, Sterling stepped out of an armored carriage. He wore a luxury black fur coat, his polished leather gloves holding a silver-inlaid revolver. His face was revealed under the roaring firelight, cold, thin-lipped, with a long scar running from his ear down to his neck. "Don't shoot the girl," Sterling ordered, his voice as cold as the Montana frost. "I need her blood alive to open the tomb. The rest of you, feel free to kill the old blind man." Cass clenched her fist until her knuckles turned white. A tomb, or blood? Those words rang in her head like alarm bells. This ranch was built on the site of an old settlement, but she'd never heard of any tomb except for the small Vance family cemetery behind the hill. She saw 2 gunmen trying to reach the cellar entrance that connected to the main house. If they got in there, they'd snag Jedediah and Reese. Cass took a deep breath, the biting cold air sharpening her focus more than ever. She adjusted her sights, calculating the windage of the northern gale. Crack, crack. 2 shots rang out less than half a second apart, so fast they sounded like one long blast. 2 soldiers collapsed into the snow right in front of the cellar door, dark red blood spraying onto the white ground, steaming in the sub-zero cold. Cass didn't stop to admire the handiwork. She bolted across the open yard through a hail of bullets, tearing up the ground. She dove into the house through the back entrance, slamming the iron-reinforced bars shut. "Pa, he's talking about a tomb, talking about my blood," Cass panted, sweat running down her forehead despite the freezing air outside. What have you been hiding from me all these years? Why does he think I can open some tomb? Jedediah was still slumped on the floor, his thin hands clutching the cedar box like it was his last lifeline. His sightless eyes were turned toward Cass, but she felt like he was looking through time, at a past full of blood and ash he tried to bury. This place, where this ranch stands, Jedediah whispered, his voice trembling like a dry leaf in the wind. It wasn't just a random patch of dirt. It's the lid on a horrific truth the army tried to wash away with blood. And you, Cassidy, you are Vance. You carry the blood of the true masters of this mountain. Outside, the gunfire suddenly went deathly silent. A heavy stillness draped over everything, save for the crackling of the fireplace. Reese, the kid shaking in the kitchen corner, suddenly shrieked in terror as a massive shadow appeared right outside the shattered window. He's got dynamite, run! Cass only had time to lunge for Jediah and pull Reese down into the secret crawl space beneath the floor just as a cataclysmic explosion went off. The pressure from the blast ripped the wooden roof off, sending splinters and stone raining down. The hiss of fire began to rise as the rafters ignited. In the cramped, earthy space, smelling of damp soil, rats, and the acrid smoke of the cellar, Cass heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of leather boots on the wooden floor directly above her head. Those footsteps weren't rushed. They carried the triumph of a predator who cornered its prey. Sterling had stepped inside the ruins. Vance, I know you're still kicking down there. Sterling's voice drifted from above, ruthlessly calm. Come on out before I toss another stick of dynamite down that rat hole. I only need your corpse to make an example of back in town, but I need the girl in one piece. Don't make me scuff my new boots. Cass looked into her foster father's eyes. In the dim light filtering through the cracks in the shattered floor, she saw Jedediah crying. Clouded tears rolled down his face, lined with decades of guilt. He took her hand, his old palm hot as a burning coal. Don't listen to him, Cass. No matter what he says, you remember. I love you like my own, Jedediah whispered, gasping in pain. He shoved the wooden box into her hands. Hold on to this. It holds the truth about you, and it's the only thing that can end this madness. The sound of a sledgehammer slamming against the cellar hatch sent dirt and wood chips showering down on them. Cass gritted her teeth, pushed Reese behind an old wooden crate for cover, and raised her rifle. The black muzzle pointed straight at the hatch that was shaking violently under the enemy's strength. She felt a powerful shift inside her. The fear was gone, replaced by a slow-burning rage and a hunger for the truth. She didn't know who Sterling really was, or why old Jedediah looked so haunted, but she knew one thing for damn sure. Anyone who stepped down into this cellar with a mind to hurt her father was going to pay with their life. The hatch burst open with a dry crack. Blinding light from torches above flooded the cramped space. Cass squinted against the glare, her finger beginning to slowly squeeze the trigger. The torchlight from above poured into the cellar like a waterfall of fire, blinding Cass for a split second. But she didn't need to see clear to pull the trigger. The thud of leather boots on the rotting wooden stairs was the only target she needed. Crack! The shot echoed through the cramped space, the thunderous report making her eardrums sting. The lead soldier, a burly man with a thick beard, jerked back. The bullet caught him square in the kneecap, sending him tumbling down the stairs onto the damp earth. He let out a gut-wrenching scream, but it was quickly drowned out by the howl of the blizzard surging through the open hatch. Back off, you sons of bitches, Cass yelled, her hands moving in a blur as she worked the lever, ejecting the spent shell and chambering a fresh round in one perfect rhythm. Don't shoot. Damn it, Sterling, she's got a rifle, another voice shrieked from above. They scrambled away from the opening, their shadows casting twisted shapes against the cellar ceiling. Sterling laughed a dry, hollow sound lost in the gunfire. Of course she does. She's Jedediah Vance's girl. Or at least the old man taught her to kill like a wild animal. Cass ignored the bait. She grabbed Reese by the shoulder, shoving him toward the narrow passage behind a stack of crates. Get my father deep inside, now. Reese, despite his shaking limbs, knew this was their only shot. He threw an arm under Jedediah's armpit, guiding the blind man into the darkness of the underground passage. Jedediah didn't fight him, but his lips were trembling, mumbling nonsense. He clutched that cedar box to his chest like a goddamn holy relic. Cass was the last one out. She smashed a spare oil lamp on the ground right at the base of the stairs and fired a shot into the puddle. A wall of fire roared up, blocking the entrance with a heat so intense the gunman above couldn't follow. Taking advantage of those few minutes, she dove into the pitch-black tunnel. This tunnel didn't look like any civilian cellar she'd ever seen. The walls were just dirt. They were reinforced with ancient pine beams turned black with age, interlaced with massive gray boulders. The deeper they went, the colder the air got, smelling of raw minerals. This was a sophisticated defense system, an underground fortress built by people who knew they were being hunted. "Pa, where the hell are we?" Cass asked as she caught up to Reese and Jedediah at a narrow fork. Jedediah panted, leaning against the stone wall. The stray bullet wound on his shoulder was starting to soak through his heavy wool coat. His face was ghostly pale under the weak light of a torch Reese had lit from the supplies along the corridor. "The ghost station," Jedediah whispered, his sightless eyes wide and vacant. "The tomb behind the hill. It was just a decoy. This is where we hid the last of the souls. Cash, you have to hold on to that box. Sterling, he wants blood. Blood to wake the mountain. He's talking out of his head, Cass." Reese looked panicked at Jedediah's bleeding shoulder. "We need medicine, or he ain't gonna make it through the night." Cass gripped her rifle tight. She looked at her foster father, the man who'd raised her with the love and hardness of the frontier. He was muttering in a strange tongue, rhythmic and deep, sounding like the wind whistling through the Bitterroot Canyons on a blood moon night. Natawista. Oki. The names echoed like voices from a different life. "Reese, watch him. I gotta bottleneck him at the narrow stretch back there," Cass ordered. She knew Sterling wouldn't give up easy. He had dynamite, and he wouldn't think twice about bringing this whole mountain down to get what he wanted. She doubled back, taking cover behind a rock ledge where the corridor narrowed just enough for one man to pass. She pulled some rusty bear traps from a wall niche and set them in the path, dusting them over with dirt. It was the way of the wolf, turning the hunters into the hunted. Leather boots thudded again, more cautious this time. Flashlight beams swept the walls. Cass tucked herself smaller, breathing so slow it nearly stopped. She saw the silhouette of a gunman, pistol out, moving like a real pro. Snap, crunch. The sound of cold steel hitting home was followed by an ear-piercing shriek. The lead gunman had stepped right into a bear trap. The rusted teeth bit deep into his ankle, crushing the bone. He hit the floor hard, his pistol skittering toward Cass. Seizing the moment, Cass lunged not to shoot, but to disarm. She slammed her rifle butt into the back of the screaming soldier's neck, knocking him out cold. She grabbed his collar and dragged him deeper into the tunnel before his buddies could open fire. "Don't shoot, we got ourselves a hostage," Cass yelled back, though she knew Sterling didn't give a damn about his men's lives. But she needed answers. She dragged the soldier into a small room off the tunnel, an old supply closet. Reese watched in horror as she started tearing the soldier's shirt to give him a rough bandage, not out of mercy, but to keep him from bleeding out before she could squeeze him for info. "Talk," Cass growled, pressing a dagger to the soldier's throat as he came to, his eyes rolling back in pain. "What's Sterling after in this tomb? What does that key open?" The soldier looked at her, a twisted grin appearing on his bloody face. You don't have a clue, do you?" "Poor kid. Sterling ain't looking for gold. He's looking for the mountain's vein, the sacred gemstone vein of the Blackfeet. That thing, it only opens when the blood of the last protector is spilled." Cass froze. The last protector? She looked down at her hands. The calluses from rifles and hard labor couldn't hide the distinct dark pigment of her skin. A cold shiver ran down her spine. "Shut your trap." She slammed the hilt of her knife into his temple, knocking him out again. "Cass, look at this!" Reese's shout came from where Jedediah was. The old man had suddenly struggled out of Reese's grip. He stood up, his blind hands fumbling over the wooden walls of the tunnel. He began pressing specific points on the ancient timber in a strange sequence. Rumble. Rumble. A section of the wall shifted, revealing a secret chamber deep in the earth. Inside there was no gold, only sun-bleached bones laid out with honor on stone altars, draped in rotted furs and bare-tooth necklaces. In the center of the room was a massive block of stone, black and polished like obsidian, radiating a dim, cold energy. Jedediah dropped to his knees before the stone, his breath hitching. They're back. Cass. The ghosts. They're demanding justice. Sterling. He's too close now. Paul, what are you talking about? Cass rushed to his side, trying to steady his shaking shoulders. The map. In the box. Jedediah wheezed, blood from his wound beginning to spill onto the stone floor. Don't let him find the entrance to the sacred cavern. If that vein is broken, the Bitterroot will fall, and the summer heat lay over time will never find peace. Just then a violent tremor shook the entire cellar. The roar of dynamite exploded right above their heads. Sterling was done playing cat and mouse. He was using blasting caps to cave in the timber ceiling, forcing them to show their faces or be buried alive. Dirt and rock fragments rained down. We gotta move, Cass. This whole place is coming down. Reese shrieked over the roar of the collapse. Cass looked at the cedar box in Jedediah's hand, then toward the tunnel filling with cordite smoke. Her enemy wasn't just 10 hired guns anymore. It was an entire past. Jedediah had tried to bury a bloody history of this land rising up under her very feet. She stuffed the wooden box into her coat pocket, slung her rifle, and hoisted Jedediah up. Reese, grab that soldier and haul him. We're going deeper. If this mountain wants blood, I'm giving it Sterling's first. They plunged into the deep darkness of the underground fort, just as another stick of dynamite blew, sealing the entrance behind them with tons of earth and stone. The final blast echoed from behind, and the suffocating sound of collapsing earth and stone filled the narrow space, completely cutting off the path back to the ranch. A terrifying stillness draped over the tunnel, broken only by Reese's heavy panting and Jedediah's weak groans. Dynamite smoke snaked through the rock crevices, acrid and bone-dry. We're boxed in. Cass, we're dead meat, Reese wheezed, his hands still white-knuckled around the shoulders of the unconscious hostage. The torch in his hand trembled, sending shadows dancing across the cold gray stone walls. Shut it, Reese. Save your breath for walking, Cass snapped, though her own heart was thumping like a war drum. She adjusted her grip on Jedediah's arm, guiding him deeper into the secret chamber he'd just opened. This room felt like a time capsule, completely severed from the world of lead and powder above. The scent of ancient pine resin and damp earth was thick. Cass laid Jedediah down against a flat stone altar, right next to sun-bleached bones that had turned to stone long ago. The medicine. Reese, get the med kit now, Cass ordered. While Reese fumbled with bandages and hard liquor to clean Jedediah's wound, Cass sat back on her haunches. Her shoulders were leaden. The weight of the Winchester felt like it had doubled after the chase. Her gaze drifted from her foster father's pale face to the cedar box he'd handed over. The box was small, no bigger than 2 palms pressed together, but it was unnervingly heavy. The carvings on the lid weren't just decorations. They were stylized drawings of mountains, rivers, and a rising sun caught between the wings of an eagle. The grooves were worn smooth by time, polished by the heat of the hands that had clutched it for years. Cass touched the rusted brass latch. A tingle ran down her fingertips, as if the box were breathing, waiting for her. Don't. Cass. Don't open it until you're ready, Jedediah whispered, his clouded eyes flickering open to stare at nothing. He's hunting us for this, Pa. I've got a right to know why my life is worth more than a damn gemstone mine, Cass replied, her voice steady. She pried the brass lever. The box popped open with a dry snap. Inside, there was no golden key or glittering gems like the rumors Sterling chased. The first thing she saw was a piece of buckskin, tanned soft as velvet, inked with a complex map in red and black. But what stopped Cass's heart wasn't the map to the sacred cavern. Tucked beneath the map was a bear-tooth necklace, strung with vibrant turquoise beads. And at the very bottom lay an old photograph, a yellowed black and white portrait wrapped carefully in a scrap of hand-embroidered silk. Cass picked up the photo. Her heart skipped a beat. In the picture was a young woman, hauntingly beautiful with deep black eyes and long hair braided over her chest. She was smiling, holding a newborn infant wrapped in fur blankets. The woman had the same high cheekbones, the same set to her lips, and the same piercing gaze Cass saw in her own reflection every morning. "Who is this?" Cass asked, her voice shaking violently. Jedediah closed his eyes, a clouded tear rolling into his gray beard. That's Natawista, your mother. And the baby is you. The world around Cass crumbled. The pine walls, the bleached bones, even Reese's presence blurred into nothing. She stared at the photo, then down at her own tan skin in the torchlight. Every jagged piece of her life suddenly clicked into a brutal picture. Jedediah's silence about her mother, the way he kept her away from the other kids in town, and the natural-born hunting skills she'd always figured were just the result of practice. "Talk to me, Pa," Cass growled, the sting of betrayal turning into a slow-burning fury. "Give it to me straight. What's the truth?" Jedediah took a pained breath, his lungs wheezing like a busted bellows. 25 years ago, I was a cavalry captain. Sterling. His father was my lieutenant colonel. We got orders to clear out the Bitterroot Valley to make way for the mining outfits. But it wasn't a war, Cass. It was a massacre. Reese stopped bandaging, sitting frozen in horror. My unit hit a Blackfeet camp at dawn while they were sleeping. Jedediah continued, his voice raspy with regret. I watched Sterling, the father of the man out there, now order his men to fire on women who were running. I protested, I tried to stop it, but I was one man. In the ashes of a burning tipi, I found you. Your mother. She'd used her own body to shield you from the lead. She was gone, but you were still there, crying for air. Cass felt the cold from the stone seep into her very marrow. She saw it, the smoke, the gunfire, and the man before her standing among the dead with a baby in his arms. I couldn't leave you there, Jedediah whispered. I pulled my sidearm and shot the officer who was going to bayonet you. Then I deserted. I took the map to the tribe's sacred land your mother was holding and lit out for these mountains. I changed my name, raised you, and tried to give you the life my brothers in arms stole from you. Cass looked at the long scar on Jedediah's shoulder she'd seen as a girl. This scar, it wasn't a mining accident, was it? A bullet from the U.S. Cavalry when I made my run. He laughed bitterly. I raised you on a lie, Cassidy. I was scared if you knew who you were, you'd hate me, or you'd try to go back and they'd kill you. I kept you caged in the Vance name to protect you from the ghosts of the past. Cass dropped the photo, her hand brushing the bare tooth necklace. She felt a terrible distance from the man she'd called father for 18 years. He was her savior, but he was also one of the men who'd brought the slaughter that killed her mother. Did he save her out of mercy or the weight of a blood-stained conscience? And Sterling, he knows who I am. He knows who I am. He knows. Jedediah nodded. His father went mad over losing that sacred map. Sterling inherited that obsession. He doesn't just want gems. He wants to wipe out the last of the Blackfeet blood on this mountain to claim it all for himself. He knows only the blood of the Protector tribe can open the way to the central cavern, the place of the heart of the Bitterroot. Just then, from the other side of the rockfall, a deep thudding started. Not dynamite, the sound of a steam drill. Sterling was using heavy mining equipment to chew through the rock barrier. The whole tunnel vibrated with the rhythm of the death machine. "He's coming through," Reese yelled, jumping up and grabbing the hijacked pistol. Cass stood up, her tears gone. Her black eyes now held the cold steel of a Blackfeet warrior and the grit of a Montana hunter. She tucked the map and the photo into her coat, right against her heart. "You saved my life, Jedediah," Cass said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "But you stole my real name, too. Tonight we'll settle that debt later. Right now we stop Sterling." She turned to Reese. "Get that soldier on his feet. He knows a shortcut to the central cavern. We're gonna head him off at the pass." "But Cass, he's too weak." Reese looked at the fading Jedediah. "Leave me," Jedediah wheezed, pushing the wooden box toward her. "The hidden path is behind this altar. Press the eagle. Go, Natawista. Protect the heart of the tribe. Don't let their blood spill again." Cass looked at her foster father one last time. A part of her wanted to scream in rage. Another wanted to hold him. But the drill was close now, the rock wall behind them starting to spiderweb. She gritted her teeth and turned toward the stone wall. She pressed hard on the carving of the sun and the eagle's wings. Rumble, rumble. The stone wall shifted, revealing a spiral staircase leading deep into the earth where an eerie green light began to glow. Cass stepped into the darkness, her Winchester ready. The roar of the steam drill behind them sounded like a monster trying to chew through the very bones of the mountain. Cass lunged down the spiral stairs, each footfall echoing off the damp rock walls with grim finality. Reese struggled to haul the captured soldier behind her, his breath coming in ragged gasps, mingled with the sound of metal clanging against stone from above. As they descended, the biting cellar chill was replaced by a humid, heavy heat, carrying the scent of sulfur and an ancient, pristine smell of minerals that had never seen the sun. The stairs ended at a massive natural cavern entrance. Cass froze, her breath catching in her throat. Before her lay a labyrinth of stalactites glowing with an otherworldly green light, not from moss, but from the actual veins of gemstones snaking through the cavern walls. This was the central heart of the Bitterroot Range, the place the map in the cedar box had been leading to. Massive limestone pillars stretched from floor to ceiling like the ribcage of some great titan. God Almighty, Reese whispered, letting go of the soldier, who slumped to the ground. The legends are true. Sterling wasn't crazy. He's worse than crazy. He's a devil with a plan, Cass growled, her eyes scanning the vast stone chamber. In the center of the cave, a natural altar-like mound rose up, surrounded by a rushing underground stream. Atop the stone sat a massive crystal, shaped like a raw, pulsing heart, radiating a steady beat of light. The heart of the Bitterroot. Cass felt a strange vibration in her own chest, as if her heartbeat were trying to sync with the stone's frequency. A violent explosion rocked the cavern ceiling. Massive boulders began to rain down, making bone-chilling echoes. The ceiling above the cave entrance was torn wide open, and thick dust and smoke poured in. Through the gray haze, mercenaries began rappelling down on steel cables, rifles slung over their backs, and sticks of dynamite ready in their hands. And then he appeared. Vance Sterling dropped onto the central rock mound on the steel line, his fur coat caked in dust, but his posture still radiating lethal arrogance. Behind him followed four of his best gunmen, their barrels sweeping every corner of the cave. "Look at it," Sterling said, spreading his arms wide. The green light reflected in his cold eyes, making the scar on his neck look like a crawling centipede. "The beauty of a massacre. My father died for this. Jedediah betrayed us for this. And now, Nitawista, you're going to open it for me." Cass stepped out from the shadow of a stalactite, her Winchester tucked tight into her shoulder. "My name is Cassidy Vance, and the only person dying here tonight is you, Sterling." Sterling let out a booming laugh that echoed through the cavern, drowning out the stream. "Cassidy Vance? That's rich. You're still choosing the name of the man who killed your mother? Old man Jediah was a hell of a shot, but a piss-poor father. He raised you on pity and lies. Me? I'm bringing you the truth and the power that comes with it." He took a step toward the crystal. "You know why my father was obsessed with this mountain. It wasn't just the gems, it was the revenge. Jedediah put a bullet in my father's head while he was just trying to do his duty as a cavalryman. He didn't die right then. He lived 10 years in pain and shame, always calling out the name of the native brat who ruined his life. I didn't just come here for the heart. I came to close the loop my father couldn't 25 years ago. You don't know a damn thing about my father's love for me," Cass gritted out, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Love?" Sterling sneered. "That was selfishness. He kept you because he was too weak to face his own crimes. You're nothing but a living sacrifice to his conscience." Sterling signaled his men. They simultaneously tossed sticks of dynamite at the stalactites surrounding the underground stream. Boom! 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 The cavern shook violently. Ancient stone pillars collapsed, and the stream water erupted into the air. Cass had to dive to the side to avoid shards of rock flying like artillery shells. In the chaos, she saw Sterling pull a silver inlaid dagger. He wasn't heading for her. He was heading for the central crystal. "This vein needs the blood of a protector to release its power," Sterling shrieked over the explosions. "If you won't give it up, I'll take it from your corpse." The fight broke out amidst the gray smoke and mystical green light. Cass opened fire. Her bullet caught the gunman closest to Sterling in the shoulder, sending him tumbling into the rushing water. The others quickly laid down cover fire, pinning her behind a rock ledge. Reese, in a desperate move, tried to toss a Molotov at Sterling, but the mining tycoon was faster. A shot from his silver pistol caught Reese in the thigh, dropping the young man with a cry of pain. "Don't damage the vein," Sterling barked as the gunman prepared to use heavier explosives. Cass realized Sterling was too cocky about his firepower. She dropped her rifle. It was too long and clunky in the smoke-filled, cramped space. She drew Jedediah's curved dagger, feeling the weight and the cold bite of the steel. She wasn't moving like a regular hunter anymore. She was moving on the instinct of the ghost she'd seen in the crypt. She vanished into the smoke, scaling the high cave wall. One of Sterling's men was searching nearby, his rifle leveled. Cass dropped from a ledge, her legs locking around his neck, her dagger slicing a clean line across his throat. The soldier went down without a sound. "She's in the ceiling," another shouted, but it was too late. Cass snatched the dead man's pistol and fired 3 times in rapid succession. 2 more gunmen folded. Now it was just Sterling and his most loyal bodyguard at the central altar. Sterling looked around, seeing his hired hands falling one by one to a shadow flickering through the green dark. A flash of doubt crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by religious fervor. He grabbed the wounded Reese and hauled him up near the heart of the bitterroot. "Come out, Natawista," Sterling roared, pressing his blade to Reese's throat. "Hand over that map and your blood, or I'll gut this boy right now. You lost your mother. You want to lose a friend, too." Cass stepped out from behind a massive pillar. The light from the crystal illuminated her face, highlighting her sharp features and her black, hate-filled eyes. "Let him go, Sterling. This is between me, you, and the people buried under this mountain." "Damn straight," Sterling grinned wickedly. 15 years I've been looking for you. 15 years of my father telling me about the child with the sacred blood who'd lead me to this horde. You don't know how important you are. This stit, you aren't a person. You're a goddamn key." He suddenly shoved Reese into the stream and lunged at Cass with terrifying speed. The hand-to-hand struggle erupted right at the water's edge. Sterling was a trained fighter. His punches and knife strokes carried lethal force. Cass was backed against the rock wall. A slash from Sterling's knife grazed her cheek, leaving a bleeding cut. Her blood splashed onto the glowing rock. Instantly, the cavern let out a deep, guttural roar from deep within the earth. The central crystal began to vibrate violently, the green light turning a blood red. "See!" Sterling shrieked, his eyes bulging with excitement. "It's waking up. The mountain wants more." The force from the stone created a shockwave that threw them both back. Cass slammed into a boulder, her ribs screaming in pain. Sterling fell right next to the heart of the bitterroot. He didn't even care about Cass anymore. He stumbled to his feet, reaching out a trembling hand to touch the glowing red crystal. "So long, Cassidy Vance," Sterling said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Welcome to the fall of the bitterroot." But the second his fingers brushed the stone, the cavern went dead silent. An absolute stillness took over. The red vibration vanished, replaced by a blinding white light radiating from the cedar box tucked in Cass's coat. The mountain spirit didn't choose Sterling. It didn't choose revenge. It was answering the map and the relics of the Blackfeet tribe that Cass carried. Cracks began to spiderweb across the crystal, not from dynamite, but from internal pressure. "No, it can't be," Sterling wailed, frantically pounding the gemstone with his pistol butt. "It's mine. I gave my whole life for this." The cavern floor began to split. Underground torrents surged up, sweeping away the steam drills and the bodies of the gunmen. Cass watched as a massive boulder from the ceiling came down, pinning Sterling's legs. He shrieked in agony, his hand still clawing toward the gemstone that was now shattering into 1,000 tiny shards. Cass staggered forward, looking down at her dying enemy under the rubble. The light in the cave was fading, giving way to the darkness of the collapse. "You were right about one thing, Sterling," Cass whispered through the dust. "I'm not Cassidy Vance, but I'm not your key either. I'm the reckoning your father sowed 25 years ago." She turned her back, ignoring Sterling's begging as it was drowned out by the rock slide. She dove into the stream, grabbed the exhausted Reese as he clung to a ledge, and hauled him toward the spiral stairs. Above them, the Vance ranch house was a roaring inferno, and the Bitterroot Mountain was preparing to bury all its bloody secrets in the eternal earth. The aggressive underground current from deep within the mountain roared, surging Cass and Reese upward through the narrow fractures of the disintegrating rock. When Cass's bloodied hands finally caught the edge of the cellar's rotting floorboards, She used the last of her strength to haul Reese out of the abyss. Behind them, the sound of the collapse echoed one final time, deep and permanent, as if the Bitterroot Mountain had just closed its stone lips to swallow Sterling and his mad ambitions into the void, forever. But the fight wasn't over. Thick gray smoke from the burning cabin above poured into the cellar, hot and acrid. "Pa, Jedediah." Cass coughed violently, staggering to her feet amidst the wreckage. She found him in the corner where she'd left him. Jedediah lay there, his breath shallow, his aged face covered in a layer of gray ash, but his hands were still white-knuckled around the hilt of his curved blade. Reese tried to pull him up, but Jedediah shook his head weakly, his blind eyes fixed on the roaring orange glow above. "Go, nada vista. House is coming down. Ain't nobody going anywhere without you." "We're getting out of here together," Cass screamed, her voice nearly drowned out by the snapping of burning rafters. She hoisted one of her foster father's arms over her shoulder while Reese took the other. The three of them struggled up the cellar stairs as the flames began to lick at the wood. When they finally burst out into the yard, a horrific sight met them under the pale light of dawn. The solid log cabin, the only fortress and home Cass had ever known, was now a skeleton of fire against the white snow. The blizzard had died down, but the air was heavy with the stench of burning pine and gunpowder. Out of the burning ruins, a figure stumbled. It was the last of Sterling's hired Gunzalenki sniper who had survived the explosion on the porch. He clutched a rifle, his eyes bloodshot from smoke and hate. "Sterling's dead. They're all dead," he spat through his teeth, his barrel trembling as he aimed it at Cass. What the hell did you do down there?" Cass shoved Jedediah behind Reese and stood tall, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip. She no longer felt the bite of the snow under her feet, or the fear of the black muzzle pointed at her. She felt an eerie stillness, as if the spirits of her mother and the Blackfeet tribe were standing at her back, giving her the steadfastness of the mountain. "I didn't do a thing," Cass answered, her voice ringing out through the ash, calm and commanding. "The mountain made its choice, and it didn't choose you." The mercenary started to squeeze the trigger, but a sudden shot cracked from the edge of the woods. The lead caught him square in the shoulder, sending his rifle flying. Out of the morning mist, Sheriff Miller and the Bitterroot Town posse appeared on horseback. They had seen the fire and heard the blasts from miles away. "Drop the iron," Miller bellowed. The mercenary collapsed, surrendering to the numbers. Cass let out a long breath, her pistol slipping from her numbed hand. She knelt in the slushy snow beside Jedediah, who was completely spent, lying on the ground where the snow was melting from the heat of the blaze. "Pa, Miller's here. We're safe," she whispered, tears carving tracks to the soot on her face. Jedediah cracked his clouded eyes. Under the brilliant light of the rising sun, his face suddenly looked remarkably peaceful. He reached up a gnarled hand to touch Cass's high cheekbone, his fingers tracing the features he had spent his life and his lies trying to protect. "Natawista," he called her name, his voice thin as a breeze. "You aren't a Vance, but you're the only pride I ever had. I stole you from your blood, but I raised you with the whole soul of a sinner looking for a way home." "I know, Pa. I know," Cass sobbed. "The box? Keep it," Jedediah wheezed. "Take it back to where it belongs. No more hiding. Live, like an eagle. Free." His arm went limp. Jedediah Vance, the butcher who betrayed the army to save a child, the foster father who caged her in a lie to keep her safe, drew his last breath just as the first light of the new day touched the peaks of the Bitterroot. Cass didn't scream. She buried her head in his chest, listening to the eternal silence of the man who had forged her. Miller and Reese stood silent behind her, honoring the final moment of a controversial legend. 1 week later, the town of Bitterroot was buzzing about the collapse of the Sterling mines and the death of the brutal tycoon. People said the mountain had grown angry, that the native spirits had risen to claim justice. State authorities had cordoned off the Vance Ranch, but they found nothing but ash and caves sealed tight by rock slides. Amidst the ruins, Cass stood before a new grave marked by river stones behind the hill, right next to where her mother Morning Star rested. She no longer wore her old hunting leathers. Instead, she draped a sheepskin cloak over her shoulders, embroidered with Blackfeet patterns she had found in the cedar box. Reese stood beside her, still leaning on a crutch. You're really staying here? The town? They're scared of you, Cass, but they respect you too. I'm not Cassidy Vance anymore, Reese, she said, looking toward the lush valley beginning to show through the spring sun. I am Natawista. The name Vance burned down with that house. You gonna rebuild the ranch? No, Natawista shook her head, her gaze deep and still. I'll build a lodge. I'm gonna protect this land, not as a rancher, but as a sentinel. Sterling might be dead, but greed never dies. Others will come looking, and I'll be here to make sure nobody disturbs the sleep of the ghosts down there again. She pulled the bear tooth and turquoise necklace from her pocket and slipped it around her neck, feeling the cold stone and the strength of her ancestors sink into her skin. She leaned down and placed a dried pine branch on Jediah's grave. Thank you for saving me, Paw, she whispered. And thank you for giving me my name back. Natawista stood up, her Winchester now slung across her back as a symbol of protection rather than slaughter. She walked toward the mountain peak, where the silhouette of an eagle soared through the crystal blue sky. Down at the base of the Bitterroot, they started telling stories of a beautiful but cold native woman who lived alone in the white wilderness. They said she had the eyes of a wolf and the shot of the grim reaper, but that her heart was as pure as the mountain spring.